Good morning, everybody. Nice to have coffee with you again this morning. Hope you had a nice weekend. Once again, a shout out to our retired Vincentians in Perryville, Missouri. And today I'd like to have a special shout out to Matt and Katie on the birth of their new baby girl. Matt and his dad, Mike Sawhill, are the ones who edit and prepare the video for viewing every Monday morning. So I thank God for them. But I also thank God for the gift of a new child that he gave to Matt and Katie and Mike and Sharon. God bless you. So here's what I'm thinking. This is the last week in October. And it's really one of the most popular weeks in our country. And not because it's Pat's birthday or the twins' birthday or Mark's birthday, but it's because it leads up to Halloween, which is on Saturday. I was astounded to find out that Americans spend over $6 billion on Halloween. As a matter of fact, it's only second to Christmas. How about this? 25% of all the candy that is sold every year in the United States is sold for Halloween. 25%. So it's kind of a big celebration. And, I think about Halloween and what it stands for, and we got costumes and trick-or-treating and carved pumpkins and ghost stories. I'll tell you what. So Mike and Don, they're at a neighborhood Halloween party. And it got late and they probably had a little too much to drink, and fortunately they could walk home. But it's a little bit of a walk, so they took a shortcut through the cemetery. And as they were walking, they were talking about how eerie it could be because the ghosts of Halloween were right here in the cemetery. And all of a sudden, they heard a little tapping, and they couldn't figure out what it was. And the further they walked, the louder the tapping got. So finally, they got up near this one grave, and there was a guy with a hammer and a chisel working on a headstone. And so, with a little too much to drink, Mike and Don, they went up and said, "Oh, thank God. We thought you were a ghost." And he said, "Oh, no. He said, "I got to tell you, my family, they're so stupid. Here I die, and they spell my name wrong on the headstone, and I came back to fix it." Ghost. The whole idea of ghost is really what the history of Halloween, the tradition. It probably began 2,000 years ago with a group called the Celts in Ireland, and they were also in part of, at that time, England and also northern France. Now, the Celts believed that the year ended on October 31st, and the new year began on November 1, and that was the end of the harvest, and it was the beginning of a long winter, and so they looked on October 31st as the end of the year. And they believed that at the end of the year, the spirits of the dead would come back and be in touch with the spirits of those who were alive. And so they were frightened by that. So here's what they used to do. They would build bonfires, dress up in costumes to scare the ghosts, to scare them. They would even have, the priests of the Celts were called Druids. And they would pray, so that the ghosts would not come. You know what else they did? They were asked to forecast the future. and predict it. Isn't that interesting that the end of the year, like we do on December 31st with New Year's Eve resolutions? So that tradition started 2,000 years ago, you know. And then I think of some of the other parts of the tradition, like trick-or-treating. The immigrants who came from Europe, they borrowed that idea of the costumes when they would go around door to door begging for food because they were poor, they were hungry. Many of the immigrants were like that. And so the costumes would disguise them. Our tradition of trick-or-treating comes from that. And by the way, there probably is not a lot of trick-or-treating going on this year, but if there is, if you see anybody that's dressed up in costume for trick-or-treating, here's what you ought to do. Instead of being frightened by it, maybe to be reminded of what the tradition was early in our country, maybe you ought to go and make a donation to the St. Vincent de Paul Society, who are taking care of the poor, or the Salvation Army. Maybe you donate a coat or something for somebody who's cold during the winter. Or maybe you just go to your local food bank. So then the trick-or-treating is an inspiration. I just think that's the way we can remember this celebration in a very positive way. The church got involved also on Halloween. And it focuses around a tourist attraction in Rome. It's a building called the Pantheon. The Pantheon was a Roman temple to the gods. And there had been several Roman emperors who changed it, and there were fires, and they remodeled the church. Finally purchased that. And today, it's a Catholic church. It stands as a monument. And Pope Boniface IV, in 609, dedicated it to all the martyrs who had died for the faith on November 1st. That's when he made the dedication. And after that, Pope Gregory III, he included all the saints. So now the very word Halloween, the eve of Hallows, people who are honored. So come Halloween, the eve of a day we remember the saints, just say a prayer in gratitude for the saints that are in your life, because they're around. They may not have been declared yet by our Holy Father or the church, but they're saints, need to be thanked. Well, Halloween is one of those special celebrations in America. And right now, America needs prayers and healing. And so, let us say our mission prayer. You've got it handy, just take it out. Divine Savior, transform me into yourself. May my hands be your hands. May my tongue be your tongue. Grant that every faculty of my body may serve only to glorify you. Above all, transform my soul and all its powers, that my memory, my will, and my affections may be the memory, the will, and the affections of you. I pray you to destroy in me all that is not of you. Grant that I may live but in you, and by you, and for you, and that I may truly say with St. Paul, I live now, not I, but Christ lives in me. So have a great celebration on Halloween, and God be with you. Stay safe.